Microsoft Puzzle Hunt has been running for employees since 1999, but this time they're opening enrollment for their puzzles to anyone.
So I'm registered for Puzzle University, where every class is a puzzle, and there's bound to be some favorites in
Top 15 Puzzles I Did in Microsoft Puzzle Hunt 2023.
Starting with my very first puzzle. On our first day, we're treated to a placement test that riffs on all their past hunts. There were some technical shenanigans, but my first one, Vexology, serves as a nice start to puzzle mechanics as my 15th place pick. While the countries are all easy to identify, I'm ultimately trying to find an answer word or phrase, and the flavor text nudges me to consider the flag colors as well. More notably, the bolded bit and 5 made a big lead to getting a clue phrase for the final answer phrase by forming letters encoded in binary. I almost did the puzzle on my own. But after some glitchy, grindy word associations, we later learn that this puzzle university is really a monster university led by Dean Martian. Along with the department head beasts, they aim to recruit puzzlers to change the world, for better or for worse. One of the departments we encountered later on was the classics round, with 3 notable puzzles and some honorable mentions I'll talk later. Lightning round. 14th place goes to the meta-storing mayhem in the Olympics. These sub-puzzles make use of some of the phrases from that gigantic list to form answer phrases based on common properties, much like the meta-puzzles I'll talk about later. Fairly classic, but still fun. 13th place goes to It's All Greek to Me. Literally. Not only do we have mangled clues we have to undo, but we also reapply them to identify Greek alphabet substrings. Extracting the final answer was tricky though, as we're getting another mangled clue rather than something legible. 12th place goes to Classical Influences on Modern Architecture, a massive skyscraper logic puzzle that required me to build my way up with deductions. I love the association of the wonders and the Legos. Almost solved that puzzle too, just needed more time or help.
But we still need to know the head honchos. Before we even take on those classes, we have the interlude puzzles that tell who we're going up against. All of these puzzles involve blackboxing our way to get information, but the one notable enough for me was the history interlude for my 11th place pick. The hardest part of a blackboxing is where to start guess checking and revising, and what to observe, like the letter coloring that may be different. My naive idea was going all A's, all B's, and so on, and yet the consistency allowed me to spot an answer phrase. After all, the mechanics are much like the hot and cold game where red is closer and hotter and blue is farther and colder.
Now, some courses we did involve logic puzzles. After all, this is a puzzle university, but with monsters running puzzle hunt courses, there's bound to be some new gimmicks. On the economics side, we're fusing the rules of Battleship and Domino with Guns and Butter. As the instructions are given straight from the page, it's all a matter of skill on executing them. But there are a lot of dominoes and ships to manage. That Control F became a big lifesaver in identifying possible placements. On the English side, we're juggling point of view with a nonogram. These usually have indicators on row and column shading patterns, but we're working 2 at a time that we need to sort out. Solving this requires making different versions to connect clues that must go with the same grid. Ordering was a really close one, but it ultimately led to point of view at 10th place and Guns and Butter at 9th place, as I was able to do slightly more on the latter. Speaking of ordering, there's quite a number of portfolios to order in my 8th place pick of C is for Closing Bell. I see groups of 26 circles, and that reminds me of the English alphabet. We are not only able to make associations with 3 sets, but also make a chain based on layer endings and beginnings. This simple premise means I have plenty of ways to contribute, with the hard part being what to do once we're done. But identifying the final answer phrase from reading across ones that popped up was the big highlight.
And continuing on with economics, we're now confronting Lord's data train with my 7th place pick of the economics meta, which means that we're taking out the answers from all those economics puzzles I've talked about. The world of economics has a lot of mergers, acquisitions, and reorgs, but we're doing so with wordplay on the stock symbols for these answer phrases. But the trickiest part is that we don't have all the feeder answer companies, requiring us to do some guesswork. Nutrimatic came in handy, as we can have a brute force the anagramming or finish out the blanks to shut electrical down. Really nice tie-in to trickle-down economics, as powering off lore led to data now making just as much sense as before. Though we still have a lot of guesswork. We've done a lot of challenging courses in this hunt, but just like in actual academia, we couldn't get everything right first try. But we can always try again, pending guess rate limits, and review what went wrong. Which is exactly what is going on in my 6th place pick, learning from our own mistakes. Anytime we made an incorrect guess in a hunt, we get a list of clue changes that ultimately resulted in an additional letter. Reading these letters off spell an instruction that repeats itself.
The interesting thing is how these clues are tailored to each team, but this also meant we need to be strategic on what wrong answers we input to get information for this puzzle.
Here's another word puzzle. Going back to the English department with my 5th place pick of articles of incorporation. Some of these clues are easy to solve, but others require some disambiguation, until we can see what letters we have used and need to use up thanks to the letter bank. Finding what to do next took a while, until we saw we can move clue answers like fridge magnets to form words after incorporating an article, specifically a and the. A cyclical ordering and index then led to an answer phrase, but I should also mention that all puzzles of the English department have 2 answers to look for. The second one required a different approach via making use of the unused letters and another article. And I like puzzles that I can solve. There's no doubt a lot of courses even for a large team, and this hunt only goes for the weekend, but I was still able to take on a puzzle myself. Human Capital, my 4th place pick and favorite that I soloed. It helped that I was sort of familiar with the setup of words being replaced by first letters. Also, as quotes represented pre-existing media, I can pull out the fill-in, finisher, and neutramatic and find what they are and later identify the rest of the initial. But I still had to contend with 2 twists. For one, while each sentence is about someone with an initial, that initial got dropped. But more notably, the X had to be replaced by a letter, which threw some of my neutramatic queries for a loop. Fortunately, once I caught on to that, I was able to track that to get 2 clue phrases that combined to the final answer.
About time I cover the math department! After all, this subject area hits home with me. One part that I looked at was Green's theorem back in multivariable calculus, but in this puzzle university, we're instead dealing with clues and color grids in my 3rd place puzzle pick. After getting through a lot of clue solving, we eventually saw how most answers are length 5 with the grid colors as gray and yellow. This looks a lot like Wordle fill-in, and makes sense with the flavor text. That also nudged us to get initial impression with the clues, as that spells out a message on reordering, recoloring, and finding all green, which really fits as the Wordle solutions are characters that are green. But the reordering and recoloring part is what made the structure really shine.
But what does that add up to? That math class we talked about had a course code, Math 7. Other courses include Category Theory of Math 15 that is more about only connect, and Lie groups in Math 200 that are more about lie. And then we get to some unconventional numbers like Math 39.166 and Math minus 34012.208. So it comes to no surprise that in my 2nd place pick of the math meta, we're pulling all that out alongside our feeder answers. This is a pure meta puzzle, so all we get is our answers in our flavor text. But the covert operations got us to see that we can consider math operations in a multivariable system of equations, which are naturally solved to letters from 1 to 26 to A1Z26. However, we don't have all the feeder answers, so we don't have enough constraints. But since we got Math minus 34012.208 solved, the exponentiation made for a huge constraint as I can pull off Wolfram Alpha to search for powers, and only found a few within that range. Once we found what n is, I can pull out tools like my number theory to constrain variables and Python programming to brute force possibilities. And it got fairly far, but not enough for a neutramatic finish. Turns out that I didn't see that there was no D and J variables until teammates got some more progress to ram Alpha Wolf. I sometimes use it to refer to my usage of Wolfram Alpha, as I really liked what they did with the fun. Before my top pick, some honorable mentions. Time Frame, surprisingly tricky logic puzzle. Introduction to sprite design. Imagine thinking that Rush was Tanuki Mario. Writing complementary characters. Didn't do much, but the minimalism really shined. The Fibonacci sequence. Love the concept of how the spirit of the Fibonacci sequence was incorporated. The Lerneurian Hydra. Good contender for funniest puzzle of 2023 in the Bravo Awards. Ozymandias. Good contender for funniest puzzle of 2023 in the Bravo Awards. Again. And sociological inquiry into commerce. Memes made a unique twist to the Einstein Zebra format. And finally, a 5-way tie for first. There's another department that I have yet to talk about, and this subject is also one that hits home with me. The CSE department, all of which landed in 1st place, and whittled with bugs. So dealing with them involves stepping through the code puzzles, just like what I had to do in my own code in actual debugging. These puzzles have a very unique input-output system that maintains a general structure. Only one problem. Many of the puzzles depend on finding outputs from other puzzles, which often depend on outputs from this puzzle in a catch-22 setting. I did the most work at list.puzz, as it's a matter of following directions, though I definitely need to excel in tracking sheets. But during step 3, there doesn't seem to be a word that is a synonym for help, until a teammate saw that sis sounds really close to assist. Now we know how empty.puz works, even though the contents are, effectively a black box.
Still, finishing step 3 required working with an output for clues.puz, a cryptic mastermind puzzle. My teammates did most of the work, but observing that all answers have length 4 as per mastermind could be useful, and Nutramatic gave us a good chance at finding outputs even if not all the inputs are found. Fortunately, getting an output from logic.puz wasn't too hard to backsolve given the layer constraints in list.puz. And after a lot of effort tracking information late at night, we finally got some outputs for list.puz. Eventually, taking on meta.puz was fairly straightforward now that we know how all the feeders work, especially with how we can one-shot the empty.puz inputs. Overall, the input-output system combined with the dependencies made for one of the most creative rounds I have ever seen.
And that wraps up Microsoft's Puzzle University. At first, the placement tests in tech weren't but then it got from 0 to 100 really quick with over 100 monstrous full-course puzzles to take on. So much that we might have overloaded. The scale of the university puzzle hunt is almost as big as MIT, and shoutouts to the crew at Microsoft for pulling all that off. And also shoutouts to the real-life teachers and TAs that helped shape my real-life education. And for viewers like you, thank you!